Good morning. Good morning. Team, welcome. How about Kim Lear last night? Wasn't she impressive? Really amazing. The best part about it from my perspective was, of course, that she set up the themes for today, and so we don't have to do very much because she covered so many of the things that we wanted to touch on today. But don't worry, we still will have a really interesting conversation here, maybe even provocative. We'll see if we get there, and we hope that you enjoy that. We're going to continue this theme about preparing for the future. And so we have several ideas to cover. We're going to start really talking about workplaces that are work-centred and human-centred. We'll go on, and as a result of thinking about that, talk a little bit about diversity and how we support a diverse workforce with a range of amenities. Then we'll take a little bit of a tactical turn and talk about the speed of delivery. 3 rapidly growing organisations up here challenged with how to deliver space in time. And wrap up with a few thoughts at the end about how we service the workforce and really sort of create a fabulous experience for people when they're in our workplaces. So with that, shall we make a start? Ready to go?
Certainly.
Dino, let's start with you with a really easy one. What's the future of work? What will we be doing in future?
Okay, if I've got 2 hours to answer.
There's a clock down here.
Yeah. So great to be here. Thanks. Boy, Kim was amazing last night. So many insights about what the future workforce isn't just going to expect, but what they're going to actually demand from employers, from workplaces, from the tools that they're providing. I think the future of work is some things that Kim hinted at. I think the speed of decision increases. I think the access to data that employees need to make decisions is much more available. I think there's a layer of transparency that's expected across that. I think the future of work is one in which every aspect of the employee's working life, be it the way that they're managed, the space that they're in, the tools that they're using, make their working life simpler, pleasant, and more productive, right? I think the future of work is up-leveling. I think the future of work is less sort of us grinding to find data to make decisions, and that data should just be there. We should have the right information at the right time to make the right call. I think the future of work is one that acknowledges the employee, like where they're at. I think Kim yesterday, talked a little bit about what Gen Z, maybe even the second half of the millennials are expecting. And they're expecting workplaces that align with their values socially, culturally, from even an activist standpoint. I think the future of work is going to be one in the physical environment in which, first and foremost, providers are going to have to remove distraction from their working lives, and then give them almost like, I don't want to say a buffet, but like a choice of options of where they can do their best work. We talk a lot at Slack. It would be unusual if we employed poets to ask them to come in and at 9 o'clock, you sit at that specific desk and be creative and brilliant. That would be absurd, right? But the modern knowledge worker, we're still sort of invoking that same mindset, right? And that's really sort of a holdover of the manufacturing revolution where like I needed to be here and you needed to be here at 8 because I was going to cut the wood and then you were going to put it together. Again, the future of work for me, just to sort of tie this together, is one in which employees have tools that replicate the speed at which they operate. They have a culture that reflects their authenticity and their identity, and they have a space that isn't a substitute for culture, but enables both their best work and supports their ideals of what a community should be.
Yeah, indeed. Josh, do you think you could build on that a bit?
Sure.
What's Google doing and thinking about the future of work, and particularly with the technology tools available to people?
Yeah, absolutely. And even before the tools in the workplace in that effect, where'd Jason, our millennial, go?
Pick up the back collaborator.
So you millennials, you're committing less. You're committing less to relationships, to work, to companies. And I don't think that's a generational thing. I actually think that's really a smart thing based on technology. It is very easy in this day and age to connect supply and demand, whether that's your skills in the workplace, whether that's dating and finding a spouse. It's had a huge effect. My neighbor, 16-year-old kid, basketball player, wanted to make some money part-time, realized that he couldn't get a job because he couldn't predict what shifts he could work. So he went on next door, said, hey, I'm a 16-year-old with a truck, willing to work for money. And after a few weeks found out people really liked when he took stuff to the dump. So he would get $55 for what took them about 1 hour to do a trip to the dumps, to making $55 an hour. That's amazing. We couldn't have done that growing up. That's an unbelievable change. So in addition to all the generations being in the workplace, which is a huge thing, we have to make the workspace the place where people feel they can absolutely do their best work because they no longer have to commit. We have some from Uber, one of the biggest marketplaces in the world, connecting supply and demand, TaskRabbit, all these things. That is up-leveling higher and higher, to Dino's point. So just that the importance of the technology's effect on the world, I think, is where you start. And then absolutely, artificial intelligence, Google's goal is to be a more helpful company. Artificial intelligence is a huge part of that. We will continue to augment folks' ability to work. Dino and I were talking before this. Are the humans, the technology always advances much faster than humans are ready to deal with it. So while we all think it sounds amazing that AI is going to now do all of our daily tasks, all those annoying tasks we do all day, what happens when at the end of the day we don't have a series of wins that we had at work that day because it was all just big picture thinking? Do we walk away thinking, what did I really get done today, versus all those tasks that are being outsourced for us overall? And then I think as you just get into, Slack, obviously we have here, the ability to work anywhere. When augmented reality, virtual reality reaches the point where there's really lightweight solutions to where 10 people in 10 different locations, they're not just collaborating, but they're actually feeling like they're sitting around a table and having a drink together and talking in 10 different time zones. The opportunity there is just amazing what can happen. So the thing with technology is, if you 15 years ago tried to predict where we'd be now, I'm guessing most of us would have been wrong. We know we're going to be wrong. There's sort of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So I would just say, as much as we can, stay close to the business, stay close to the evolution, have the flexibility in place, and be ready for things that you can't even imagine right now.
Yeah. Let's dig into the tools just a little bit further. Dino, can you tell us a little bit about what difference Slack, the product, has made to work, and Josh, too, about Google Hangouts? Tracie, if you have specific technologies you'd like to talk about as well, we'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I won't talk about Slack specifically. I will talk about this sort of category of tools, right? There's a technology stack out there with tools like Google, Hangouts, Slack, Teams, Zoom, some amazing project management tools, Asana, Trello, all of these, that are really liberating the employee to do their best work at any time and at any place, right? And Josh talks about proximity. Like, it is getting better. I mean, I think Zoom success, if you don't use Zoom, Zoom success isn't that they invented video teleconferencing, they just made it that much kinder, like that much easier, right? We didn't realize how bad it was until, the sort of new wave of products are coming on. I think what all of this technology stack does as well, too, it sort of breaks down some management dynamics. It used to be that, almost pre-internet, the boss would come out of the meeting like, hey folks, it's just the big shed and, big meeting, got a lot of information. And then they would slowly dribble it out to us like we're little birds, like, give me info, I need this. and so what it's doing is, to an extent, liberating the workplace a little bit, right? There's a baseline of trust that now has to be there where most employees have access to most of the data and most of the decisions, which is a good thing. Right? We hire folks to come do their best work of their lives. We tell them they are trusted, valued employees, but then our institutional systems didn't provide them the data and the resources they need. So to your question, Antonia, I think this technology stack that is out there right now is really going to challenge, what does the physical work environment look like? What does it need? In fact, at Slack, we have designed a couple of our larger conference rooms. We didn't design the room and then brought the tool in. We actually built rooms around Zoom. We started with Zoom's technical data, with their acoustic sort of tolerances, and then we designed the entire room around that individual tool. So increasingly, the tools are going to drive not just how work is being done, but where work is being done is conceived of.
Yeah, and I think there's the interesting dead on there. Will we start to organize less around locations and more around time zones going forward, or is it going to go the next step and the people do genetic testing all the time. There's morning people and evening people. Are we going to have teams organized by evening people who like to work in the evening in this location and morning people in this time zone who want to work together and collaborate? I think it's unlimited what can happen out there. And the workspace maybe becomes we come together this often very consciously for this type of collaboration, but we know we can effectively collaborate this often outside of that time.
Yeah, maybe no doubt, this is not a sad dystopian future in which people still don't connect in real life. Even at Slack, we have some sort of rules. Like, hey, listen, we've all had the boss or the coworker like, I'm sitting right here, you just emailed me, like just come and tell me this. We have some rules that say, hey, listen, if you can do it IRL, if you can do it in real life, please do that. There is something about human connection of being in proximity that's important. So.
Yeah. Tracie, Uber's creating a fabulous campus around that idea. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a small world these days. To both my colleagues' point here, we have all the tools, all the technology. It's all designed in. People will book a conference room to have a meeting a floor down. You're just on 3 different floors talking to each other in single conference rooms. So the challenge of building a campus or spaces out there in the world that connect people becomes harder and harder as you get more plugged in. And so I think for us, it's a lot about choice. It's a lot about building spaces that create opportunities to build community spontaneously, that sort of support not only the company culture, but also the individual culture and specifically even regional cultures. And I think that's a blend. That's a blend of what I like to say analog and digital. We are new, kind of like you guys. So Zoom is, and technologies like that are deeply plugged into our whole system. And so on the other side of that, it's how do you still have that face-to-face connection? And a lot of that comes in through strategically placing spontaneous points through your campus to connect and have that face-to-face.
Yeah. I mean, if we agree that there's a variety of people at work and there's a variety of ways of work, we can very quickly move into talking about diversity and how we support those variations in the workforce with our workspaces. Tell us some stories about how you're addressing really diverse aspects, people in your workplace. Kim brought up a couple of good ideas last night, and I think we might build on those with a few comments here.
Yeah, so, first of all, we set aside this idea. We all agree that more diverse and inclusive cultures build better product and are better teams. Like, there's a mountain of data from the best business schools, from the best research organizations. If for nothing else you were just a greedy capitalist asshole, you would build a more diverse and inclusive team, right? It's obviously not the reason we're doing this. So at Slack, we think a lot about this, right? It goes to this idea that Kim was talking about authenticity, goes a little bit to even activism, right? And so we're embracing this in every regard. Slack, for a tech company, more than 50% of our company is female. More than 60% of our senior leadership is female. And again, we're not going out there and just trying to fill that need. We will go farther to find that candidate that is at or above the skill set that we're looking for. But some things we're doing functionally in the space is. In New York, we're building an office down there in Union Square, the old Tammany Hall. Does anybody know that building? They're throwing a little dome up on it right now. But Union Square is interesting. It is in fact just that. It's where organizations used to come together to align, to protest, to activate. Everything from women's suffrage to the bread riots, all of this happened. So we have this really iconic building down there that we're working on right now. And we're making this choice that, as Kim alluded to yesterday, that part of having diverse and inclusive culture is also generationally, folks want to have louder voices. You saw the quote from Mark Benioff saying that, leaders had better start to take positions on some of these issues. So we're actually making the basement floor down there, which used to be a place where folks could organize to take on social movements. We're actually turning it back into that. And it is, in fact, a space in Union Square where, after hours, our employees can work with different groups to provide them a resource of space to sort of voice and encourage, some of their activist positions and ideas. Yeah. A bit risky, but we're trying to meet them where they're at. Again, I think if you look at what meaningful work is, it is going beyond just production. It is, in fact, well-being, and even deeper, it's alignment with their cultural values and ideals.
What's happening at Google?
Yeah, a lot of stuff in the news about that lately at Google. I'm sure people heard about the walkout and various things of that nature over time. I think Google's interesting because we've talked about scale and growth too. Just as a little tidbit.
Let me interrupt. How many people at Slack today?
About 2,500.
And at Google?
100,000 employees.
Okay, carry on, please.
Yeah.
Scale.
Yeah. But it's an interesting fact about that. Early on in Google's, when it was a small company, it was highly ahead from an engineering standpoint in terms of female engineers. Larry and Sergey, our founders, that was something they believed to be not the right thing to do, but just because it's the right thing to do, but a better way to build a company. And then when we got more male heavy in engineering, that was through massive growth. And that goes back to where the supply of males on the market was much higher than the supply of females there. And you have to get a little more conscious when those things start to happen. So I'm sitting on our Diversity and Inclusion Council for my organization. And what we're realizing too is you can't just sit there and say everything has to exist as it is today and then we have to figure out how to add better diversity and more inclusive spaces within our own org. We have to think about where are we sourcing candidates? What are we doing in interviews that's potentially excluding groups of candidates with different backgrounds overall, and how is our unconscious bias? We have a huge unconscious bias program that everyone in the company takes. We've done some deep dives with our org. How are those things affecting our decision making there? And then when we get outward, as we're delivering all the spaces for people, we want everyone to feel like they can do their best work. We want it to be an inclusive space, and then the challenge just become how do you balance that? We've got some really interesting feedback. We had a blind gentleman who talked about what a nightmare accessible bathrooms were as a blind person, dealing with the size of accessible bathrooms and trying to find his way around. I had an amazing experience a month ago. I was in Israel for a week, spending time on the West Bank with people, Palestinian people, Israeli people, learning a lot about that. And one of my colleagues was a engineering director who's in a wheelchair. And his thing he talked about was high tables everywhere. All these high tables at Google, people like to stand with the high tables. And that's obviously fantastic feedback and really interesting, but then the challenge becomes how do you balance that? There's also a lot of people who really like high tables and work at high tables. What is the right mix of, does everything have to be inclusive for everything? Does it have to be right balance? And to be honest, it's a struggle that we keep working through constantly.
Yeah, we work with our D&I team for sure, and then also our employee resource groups, our ERGs, to first understand what is the challenge, what is it that we should include and why. And it's easy to do it in the U.S. There's lots of codes, there's lots of opportunity, but in other countries, there's a cost associated with some of it. And so we really did have to identify what was the most important and achievable amenity pieces that you could add from a D&I point of view. And then as a company, we made some commitments. So we made some commitments on the real granular level to make sure there was gender-neutral restrooms on every floor in every building in all of our offices globally, multi-faith prayer rooms that, they're religious, non-specific, but you can also meditate. They're focused on wellness. We got a lot of feedback about having spaces just to be quiet, just to have some headspace, just to have space when you're not feeling well, to have a room to do that. So those are the kind of commitments that we're making around the world right now, and we're continuously, to your point, Josh, they're not always easy to achieve everywhere. So we're constantly trying to get feedback on what's the most important to our employees. And then, we've got the other side of who our customer is too, in drivers. How can we service that population in our public spaces too, is always a consideration there as well. So we're learning as we go here, for sure.
I'll offer this too. I think if you look at the two things that I think all of us hope to achieve in workspace design, build, is that we want to make our employees' working lives more productive, and we want to support employee well-being. On the productive side, clearly people who feel more comfortable in their working environment are going to be more productive, right? On the well-being side, and you heard all of us are struggling with diversity and inclusion, how do we meet, what is the right balance of gender-neutral bathrooms, of meditation spaces, of sensory depth spaces? I think what employees, they may challenge you on the results you deliver, but what they will give you credit for is the meaningful attempt to address it, right? And again, I think when you look at the modern workforce, those are the things that they're going to be evaluating employers on. Is this the place that that I want to be? Is this a company that aligns with my concerns?
Your personal values?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We hear this term, the amenities race. You all have downtown San Francisco presence, also in other parts of the world. Are you in the amenities race? Is it a thing? Does somebody go from one company to the next because of better food or a nicer gym or something else?
Well, we don't compete for product necessarily. We compete for talent. And so we kind of have a range here of time out in the market. And so we were kind of laughing about this earlier. I hear all the time, I get an email from someone that says, when I was at Google, I had X, Y, and Z, and why can't we have that? And I was like, well, this is where we are, this is what we offer, and we think it's great. And if you have a suggestion, that's awesome. We're super excited to hear it, but we're not Google. We haven't been in the market that long. We have different goals right now. And so while we offer amenities that I think are pretty amazing, there's always more. And then we were also sort of laughing about this earlier. Once you give something, it's very hard to take it away. So we are learning from our big brothers out there. Careful what you offer, because it will follow you.
Yeah, the second you offer the strawberry lime kombucha and then you take it away, people start updating their LinkedIn profile.
Terrible.
Like, well, this is all gone to hell.
Yeah.
We've lost the kombucha.
I can tell you the number of emails about eggs. There are not enough eggs in our pantry. I was like, okay.
Yeah, read Glassdoor, right?
When I was, this is years ago, I used to run a bunch of our human performance health amenity programs. And I would talk, one of my colleagues and I would talk, and we started calculating, because I think the most dangerous thing about what we were doing was that people were copying what we were doing, but not the intent of what we were doing. And we started realizing, okay, so if all these tech companies started kind of doing what Google was doing, okay, then these other normal corporations started copying it. And all of a sudden, government agencies are coming to us to try and find out and say, well, Google offers this, and we want to attract the same as Google, so we do that. So that you get up to where you're getting close to potentially 1 billion people in corporations that are trying to do some version of what Google's amenities programs are, but they're not actually asking the questions of what you're trying to achieve with the program overall. So, and they're all valid reasons, whether you're doing something as a signal, whether it's for health, whether it's to decrease stress, save time, drive community. It can work. If you get into they have that, so we have to have that, or the employees raise their hand and want this, so we got to do that, then it does become a zero-sum game. But I'll just use an example. Our food program, which is really well positioned, has a strong intent, strong brand position. They communicate that to our users. And while the newspapers and whoever may write that the food program is so that people stay at Google and work for 20 hours a day, it's not it. The food program is about really two things. It's about community and it's about health. People coming together and people having health. If that wasn't the case, just to give an example, one of our programs, we have teaching kitchens all over the world where Googlers can learn about food, how to cook, and all those things. And in a way, you could say, well, isn't that going to mean people leave work instead of staying and working? Maybe, but our goal there is to say a couple things. Yes, there's the community of coming together, learning how to cook, but there's also the people that learn how to cook, they tend to eat healthier. They also tend to spend more time with their families. We get stories of people who say, I learned to cook, now my daughter and I cook together twice a week, and it's the best part of my week. So we want to support that healthy life and that balance they have overall. So just making sure that you not only have a real intent, but you communicate that. Lots of people in our world like to say we don't have a brand. You have a brand whether you want it or not. So make sure that the brand is saying what you want it to say.
Josh, how many meals do you serve, you personally?
I serve
a day.
Now, around the world, we're somewhere in the probably 225,000 meals a day, just for sort of the scale of Google.
And what do the employees pay for that?
For the most part, zero. All zero, actually.
Yeah, we're all zero.
Yeah.
So Slack is going to take a bit of a contrarian view of this.
Yeah.
Let's go back to meaningful work, right? None of us show up every day, probably. If you do, probably question why you're at the organization or what you're doing. But meaningful work for us, this is where this really starts, is that, like, do I have work that is important and impactful? Do I have a boss that trusts me? Do I have access to tools that make my working life better? Am I respected? Am I in a place that values, my diverse background? So at Slack, we're kind of pushing back on this. We don't do 15 meals a week. We do maybe a breakfast once a week or a lunch every other week. We believe that we pay you a good salary. Go be a part of the community. Take your money, walk out of the building. You probably need to leave it anyway, and go share that benefit, that resource. Tech can, be criticized for being a bit of a bubble. Again, making people's working life simpler, pleasant, and more productive. I think people are confusing pleasant with entitlement. Yeah. Entitlement quickly degrades into distraction. Quickly degrades into, well, I had it yesterday, why don't I have it today? Literally on one of our walls in all of our offices, there's some version of a sign that says work hard and go home. This isn't your whole life, this is just your working life, right? Also, one of our core values is humility, right? And being humble. And so it's interesting with the level of amenities that we provide, which we have some pleasantries in Slack, but what is it that we're telling the employees? There's that saying that your culture will never be better than the worst behavior that you tolerate or encourage, right? That is very much it. And by the way, if some employee is staying at Slack because we have 4 types of kombucha, that is the wrong employee and we're probably the wrong company. I'll say this, please show me the ROI on 1 more free cupcake, because it isn't there, right? It's distracting, it's insulting to everybody involved. If we were to evaluate why we come to work every day, it's because we want to make an impact, we want our voices to be heard, and we want to make an impact on that mission. Everything else, in some means or some way, like even Josh was talking about, should support that, should either support the productivity or the employee well-being. Otherwise, it's just a giveaway.
Yeah, and on that note, because I think it's interesting, we worked with IDEO years ago to really think about what drives these things and what makes them effective. And one of the things that always sticks in my mind was peaks, not plateaus. Plateaus, it just becomes your baseline. If you're just here, it becomes your baseline, and then it becomes a bad day when the chicken wasn't what you wanted that day. And that variation in experience in peaks and plateaus is actually a really effective way to run an amenities program.
How about with urban campuses and sort of suburban campuses? How does that location affect what you think about amenities? You spoke about asking people to go out into the community and spend their money.
Right.
It's great unless you're at a place where it takes 10 minutes in the car
like
to get
Facebook's
to
Menlo Park campus, I used to work there, probably could not have 12,000 employees drive away from the campus at lunchtime, right? So.
Right.
And a lot of places have weather that we don't have in the Bay Area too. That is a consideration. I think for us, the biggest piece is always the commute, especially when you get into an urban market. How fast can I get there? What's it going to add to my time overall, my work-life balance? So that's something that we consider a lot when we're thinking about placement and then what amenities we provide for.
Yeah. You might have to catch an Uber.
You might have to catch an Uber.
Access to public transportation is quickly moving up on our weighted criteria.
Yeah.
Employees are demanding it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and not just for the ease of transportation, but for the sustainability aspect of it.
Number one stressor, commute.
Yep.
It's Bay Area especially, but not just the Bay Area, the places. Access to public transit is becoming huge.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Tell us about your new location in San Francisco and how that's going to be serviced.
Yeah, so we are opening 1 million square feet in San Francisco proper, starting here in June 2020. It's 4 buildings. 2 are part of the Chase Center development with the Warriors. And the Warriors, if everyone's our basketball fans, I won't explain that part, but moved over to San Francisco. There was a development of 2 office buildings, office towers that flank the new stadium with plazas, retail space, restaurants and bars, lots of good stuff over there. And we originally had 2 buildings right next door to that. So as we grew at speed, we sort of started tapping on the shoulder of the Warrior saying, hey, are you going to use all that space? And then at the end of it all, we ended up taking all of it. So we'll have a 6,000 person campus in San Francisco proper, which there's not a lot of space left to have that in San Francisco. That's not down the peninsula or in the East Bay or anywhere else. So feel really lucky about the development that's there, and trying to be really good citizens of the community, and making sure that we're giving back to public transportation and not just in Uber, but in infrastructure support. Making sure that there's retail space that is additional as landlords now. What are the retail spaces that's going to benefit the community, not just our campus, and that's gonna drive folks down there for more than just Warrior games. So we're really excited about the campus. It keeps me up at night, can't lie. But yeah, starting June 2020. If you want to take a tour, let me know.
And for those of you not familiar with San Francisco, it's past the Giants Stadium. If you've maybe seen that or been there, perhaps seen an aerial photograph, it's just a little bit further, sort of out of town, if you like, beyond that stadium. So
pretty amazing spot.
Yeah, it's a great spot. It's called Mission Bay. If you're not familiar, if you are familiar with that, but the traffic is the number one question I always get. How are we going to get our 6,000 employees to and from that area when there's a game? That's 18,000 fans. You get a baseball game going, which is about 1.5 miles down the road. It's congested. Yeah. It is for sure. I'm suggesting zip lines across the bay, but no one's really taking me up on that just yet.
Jetpacks.
For those not familiar with San Francisco, if you wonder why people don't just live closer to there, just go on Zillow and check out the
Yeah, it's a little expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, giving back to that infrastructure, new central lines, is super important to our population down there. And I think we talked a little bit about this in terms of amenities. Truthfully, it's about engagement too. And we looked at that for this campus. I personally don't feel like it's ping pong tables and beer taps that drive employee engagement. It's how is your work-life balance? What are the wellness amenities that you have? How is this easier and seamless on your life? And we were also kind of talking about how do you measure that? And it's hard. It is hard to do that because experience is subjective, and so yeah, we're listening to that population as we build this campus.
The culture really has to match the amenities too. I had someone from a company, and I want to say it was Kansas City, tell me, oh, we're encouraging people to go to the fitness center during working hours and to do some recreational games. They just have to sign out with their manager when they do it.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not encouraging people to use the fitness center. Like the culture has to match up to it.
So we get a lot of companies, or even a lot of governments, that come in and they sort of do this innovation tours of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
These big groups, and they're all well-meaning, but to this alignment of your culture and of your space and amenities and of your product or your tools, the open office floor plan is symbolic collaboration. Right? It isn't actual collaboration. It looks as such, but you've got to acknowledge that for about 50% of the population, it is either visually or acoustically distracting. It may induce anxiety for some folks. And so when we have these folks come in, even when they use Slack, like Slack is a collaboration and communication tool, and we'll talk to some pretty old growth companies, and they'll come in like, hey, we'd love to use Slack. And I'm like, why? And like, well, it'll make us more collaborative, transparent. Like, whoa, it's just software. Like that is something you've got to work in culturally that is well beyond this. Now, your space and its amenities, your culture and its feeling, the tools you give, all of those can support that initiative, right? But again, the open office floor plan isn't going to suddenly make your organization more transparent or more collaborative. Slack isn't going to do that. They must all come together in some meaningful alignment to get that sort of net result out of that.
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about open office.
Not right now, not right now.
Thank God.
Someone else will pick that up later in the day. Let's talk about pace of change. I mean, you're all inferring that you're really sort of caught in this in very intense pace of delivery. How do you keep up? How million square feet coming online? I'm sure there's sort of inward pressure in your organization, desperate for that extra space to come online. How do you address rapid change, growth, expansion, and the fact that we just can't deliver space that quickly? Talk about speed of delivery and how that is addressed in your organizations.
I mean, maybe repeating myself, but it's really staying close to the business and anticipating where you can, having flexibility where you can. But the challenge from my standpoint, yeah, it's hard enough, the amounts of millions of square feet we're bringing on like it's nothing. That's hard enough by itself, but 10 years ago, those millions of square feet would have been for the same software engineers who are doing that, the same salespeople who are doing that, and the same G&A people who are doing that. And now some of it's cloud, and they need enterprise, and they need customer hosting spaces. Then we're doing self-driving cars, so we need that to go here. And we're trying to extend human life, so we need these types of labs here. And we're doing hardware, so we're going to need different types of workspaces and labs here. It's the mass customization that's the challenge versus just the mass building there. And the only solution we can have is to be working along common vision, be as decentralized as possible and as close to the business as possible. So whether it's close to the business, close to the location, working off a common vision, that's the only way we're able to do it, and it's still real hard.
How much space are you bringing on?
I said this before, so I hope no one's live tweeting this. I don't know if this is public or not, but our average is probably somewhere around 50,000 square feet a week of new space and refresh space a week, which is weird. It starts to feel normal at a certain point, but it's insane.
Would you repeat that and just say it slowly?
Yes, again, amongst friends, not telling the outside world, about 50,000 square feet a week. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's hard to come back from that, isn't it? Speed of delivery, Dino,
so I think,
what are you guys thinking about?
We're still young and scrappy. I think we have 18 offices right now. For us, I would say this, it is really reliant on our partners, our broker partners, our design and build partners. It's interesting that, particularly on the architect and design side, the partners we've used around the world have really gone deep in not just understanding practically what we need, 250 seats, gender neutral bathrooms, and all hand space. It's really great to see the designers and architects really go deep on us in our culture and our values and like, what do we want that final experience to be, right? And then we give them some guiding principles, but boy, I wouldn't be here today, Slack wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for a host of these great partners and vendors that we work with around the world. Slack isn't a real estate company, we're a software company, and we'll continue to leverage the best of the industry. We're not gonna exchange our opinion for their expertise, and it's through those relationships, setting aside our ego, and really finding partners that can align with us, not just on functionally what we need, but on experientially what we need has allowed us to hit our mark.
Mm-hmm. Global challenges around speed of delivery. How do you do it somewhere else?
Massive. Yeah, for us, speed to market has been the number one priority. I kind of like to joke that we're in our teenage years. We're not quite scrappy anymore, but we're not quite, completely adults. And so we're figuring out how to do that when your headcount is so volatile. You can't predict because it's growing so fast, shifting and changing. And so for us, we've sort of had to take a step back and look at the long game. What is the investment we want to put out there instead of many small offices or many small kind of startup level lease lengths? We're looking at longer talent hubs that will help us grow and scale, and that's globally. So the US and 13 other talent hub sites out there in the world. And then, from there, it's working with our strategic partnerships too, understanding our business rather than being an order taker, really being that strategic partner to our lines of business is really key. Understanding their goals become our goals. And translate into how we plan and how we are developing those sites. And then, it comes down to being very strategic, having, your ducks in a row and ready to go. And I always kind of like to joke that we build the plane while we're flying it. So yeah, that's
say that next to the pilot.
I know, right? Some things work great. Standardization is key there, but we like to make sure there's a healthy amount of cultural and location-specific choice involved in all of those hubs as well.
Great.
It's good to remember we all work for software companies led by software people who hack, who change things quickly, and you tell them the real estate cycle change might be 3 years, they sort of look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that's just an important factor. I always think we're on our third year in a row of hiring more than twice the people that we were told we were going to hire that year. Which that really starts to add up very quickly. It's a wonderful problem to have, but it's a huge challenge for us. We're a little mature globally, but I've been there when we're opening up in new locations, and that's the hard part. When you're at 100,000 people, I was dealing with one of our senior VPs the other day who's like, I think there was a real opportunity in Munich, so we want to add a few hundred people in Munich, which is really nothing out of 100,000 people, but when there's 100 people in Munich right now and you want to go to 400, that's a huge change, and you want to do that next month, that's not going to happen next month. And so really having clear communication around that.
Yeah. So in this high demand environment, how do you deal with servicing the workforce? How do you create an amazing experience for your people? How do you support, the pot of coffee that got smashed on the floor of the kitchen, and how do you support the security gate that won't lift up, and those kind of irritants that come up in people's days, and how do you think about improving the experience of your workforce?
Taking this one.
I'll start with this. We're obsessed with it. Like, again, if we have a couple rules at Slack. Like, first and foremost, all my workplace team around the world knows this. Like, I have no tolerance for broken or dirty. In fact, if you can't fix broken or dirty, don't try anything more aspirational.
Yes,
stay away from the Chrome Panda in the lobby. Stay away from the kombucha tap, soft serve machine, and just focus on that, because that's what's upsetting. That's what's distracting. That's what's annoying to average employee. Again, how can I tell people to come do the best work of their lives, to do it with solidarity and craftsmanship when their desk is broken, or the bathroom doesn't work, or the shade doesn't go down, or the HVAC system can't regulate correctly in the space? So we really obsess with that. The second thing to this point is, like, how do we deal with meeting those services at scale? Again, employees are quite forgiving. They'll be forgiving if something breaks or if it takes a bit to get something. What they're not forgiving for, in the speed of communication that we now exist in, they will not give you a break on how quickly it takes you to acknowledge that. And so for us, of course, we use Slack and Slack. We have a help channel, someone posts a concern or something. We have an SLA that will acknowledge that concern within 2 minutes. Like, hey, thank you for this, we saw this. And again, because of Slack, we can leverage my employee base around the world to do this. And then we try to put a solution in place, short of needing an actual repair, in 10 minutes. Again, if first and foremost, I can't make the workplace more productive or support employee well-being, I damn well be able to support the removal of distraction. And what is most distracting when on the services side is probably employees putting in a help ticket and it just goes into some void, which again, it's less about fixing the thing and more about what it says to them and the importance of the work they're doing.
I think it's important to remember there's the two things that are going to affect the perception of the employee experience are their expectation of the experience and the experience itself. So being clear on what that expectation is overall. We've got one of our partners back there. We're going to do 60,000 moves this year in the Bay Area. Does that sound about right? Yeah, about 60,000 moves, employee moves in the Bay Area. And if we don't tell them what they can expect from the move, they're going to fill in the blanks on how well we did or how well we didn't do overall. So being clear on those service levels and what can actually be expected, and obviously having the clear operation to back it up in place, because I've also been in times where we've decided to set expectations and haven't resourced those expectations properly. So being full alignment, delivery, operations, execution, communication, all those things together.
And service tickets, I mean, it's mundane. How does Google deal with that scale of workforce and the amount of activity that must be generated?
Yes, there is a lot there. The future we're hoping for and we're working with closely is how artificial intelligence can improve the service tickets there, and not only dealing with them, but helping us understand them better and set up for them in the future. Because right now it is fairly decentralized, fairly reactive. We're not where we want to be on it. Despite the massive amounts of data that we have, it may still not be enough for machine learning, but this is where having good operations in place is key. So let's give you an example here. We wanted to work with machine learning and see how we can improve our ticketing system in a number of ways. But when around the world, if you do things just slightly differently, the machine learning won't work anymore. So you first have to have those. You may think it doesn't matter if we do things differently, but if you want to apply technology solutions, you better make sure that you're doing things in a uniform way to be able to apply those solutions going forward.
I think employees are scrappy now too. They want to solve their own problems.
Yeah.
So if you can give them the data or the resource, would rather just go do it themselves. I'm always intrigued. Facebook, we have these. I know Google, I don't know if Uber haven't been in, but Slack, we have these vending machines throughout the building, and they have just like a ton of IT equipment, like dongles and batteries and mouse pads, and think of, again, if you need one of those things, typically you put it in to get manager approval, you'd have to go pick it up from the IT help desk. Employees can just use their badge, swipe it, self-serve themselves. Again, I love that for two reasons. Practically, it solved their problem, but again, culturally, what did it say to them? Like, we trust you that you're not going to clean us out of AAA batteries or you're going to take more than one mouse or something like that. I just love those sorts of solutions because they allow for self-service to solve the problem quicker, and then they speak to us culturally.
Are you exploring any new ideas on that front?
Yeah, for sure. Along with automating some of those systems to get out of the JIRA ticket cycle, we're employing a employee experience app. So basically, you get real-time information at your fingertips. So you spill your coffee, you take a picture of it, it sends it right up to our facilities, you get an answer right then. It's at your fingertips, and hopefully that's going to help with a little bit of the cycle of getting caught in from a ticket perspective. But then when you're talking about employee experience, you kind of have to look at the whole life cycle of the journey of an employee, not just from the coffee spill point of view, but from the first time they apply for a job at Uber to the last day that they leave and everything in between. And so how do you make that as seamless as possible? And a lot of that is technology, but a lot of that is people. It's being greeted. It's the communication piece. And making sure that you've got enough touch points along that journey that you're meeting all of those at every point on that journey, whether it's career growth and development, whether it's onboarding, do you have the information that you need? Does your Wi-Fi work? I guess in facilities, if you hear nothing, you're doing a good job. Right. So yeah, we're sort of looking at the broad sweep of how to improve the total journey from one end to the other.
We're actually using the communication on our tickets as a way to norm our culture a little bit. Our help channels are open to all the employees. So every employee, if they have nothing else to do, I guess they can go on that channel and watch. I love that for two reasons. It's the same reason you see the success at Airbnb or Uber, because there's accountability on both sides. We're sort of each rating each other. Because they're an open channel, because it's not going to some Jira ticket void, it makes the employee a little bit kinder, a little more human when asking for this service, and it makes my employee's response certainly the same. And then there's a level of accountability as a leader there. There's also a little bit of like, oh, someone else already put in that the 9th floor is too hot. It's really interesting when you sort of publicize all of those help tickets. It's great in terms of, again, driving this humility, this kindness, and then also driving accountability on my side.
And we were talking about measurement before. Be careful how you set up your incentives around this here, because we've seen the bad side of that. If you incentivize people to resolve a ticket within 24 hours, they will resolve it.
Forget it from the
Yeah. It may not feel resolved to the end user, but it was resolved because they're hitting their target.
Close.
Last thing on that is I've got a great leadership core at Stuart Butterfield and our C-suite. I like it when workplace or facilities are the provider of good and not the takeawayer of such, right? And so, like, if there's hard decisions to be made, those aren't communicated by us. They put my service team in a really terrible place. Yeah. And so if in fact there's an amenity that's going to get pulled back or something needs to change, or if there's behaviors we don't see, my CEO will not hesitate to take a picture of a cereal bowl left on a table and blast it out to 2,500 employees, like, pick up your fucking mess. Like, and what that does culturally is amazing, right? And again, they've given me that top cover, so we can only do that thing where we focus on productivity and well-being.
Great. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap. Thank you so much, panelists. Appreciate the conversation. Go forth. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you guys. Wonderful panel to kick off today. Thank you, Antonia, for moderating.